"You're not invited. You make this family look bad." Those words hit me harder than I expected. My own mother, standing in front of a flower-covered arch at my sister's wedding rehearsal, said them without blinking. Everyone else stood around pretending not to hear, except my sister in her white designer dress, who smirked like it was justice being served. I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. Not because I was violent or toxic or estranged, but because I was inconvenient. I was the shadow they all tried to forget, the one they blamed when things went wrong. And now they wanted me erased. Before we go any deeper, hit like, leave a comment. If you've ever been the black sheep, and subscribe for more real stories about family truth and healing. My name is Cecilia, and I was 13 when my family unofficially decided I was the root of their unhappiness. That same year, my parents got divorced, and somehow it was my fault. No one said it directly, but my mom cried to relatives about how I changed how I caused tension, and how she couldn't take it anymore. My father quietly left, taking only a small suitcase and a hollow look in his eyes. I barely saw him after that. Meanwhile, my little sister was still the golden child, loved, praised, protected. I grew up confused and alone. I wasn't a bad kid, but every misstep I made was amplified, every word twisted. So when I walked into that wedding rehearsal and saw my name missing from the guest list, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was. It still hurt, especially when I realized I was being punished for something I didn't even understand. But the truth has a way of rising. And I was about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they knew about me. What really happened the year my parents divorced, and why was I the one left with the blame? Let's go back to where it all began. I still remember the smell of the rain the night my dad left. It was spring, and I was 13. I sat at the top of the stairs, hiding behind the railing knees, hugged to my chest. Down below, my parents were arguing again, but this time it felt final. There was no yelling, just cold, tired voices echoing off the walls. My mom said, "I can't do this anymore. She's tearing us apart." She meant me, and my father didn't defend me, Vai. He just stared at the floor, nodded, and left. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there paralyzed by a guilt I hadn't earned. After the divorce, everything changed. We moved to a smaller house. My mom grew colder. She always seemed one step away from snapping at me, while my younger sister Lena remained her sunshine. Lena had ballet classes, birthday parties, perfect report cards taped to the fridge. I had silence. Anytime I asked a question, voiced an opinion, or even showed emotion, my mother would sigh like I was exhausting her. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" she'd mutter under her breath. Sometimes she'd say it louder just to sting. At school, I tried. I stayed out of trouble, got good grades, kept to myself. But no matter what I did, I carried this invisible weight like something was wrong with me, and everyone could see it. By the time I was 16, I stopped expecting affection. I stopped asking why. Instead, I focused on escaping. I got a part-time job at a bookstore. It was quiet, and no one looked at me like I was a burden there. I saved every dollar. I spent my evenings studying and my weekends shelving novels, imagining a life where I could start over. College was supposed to be that life. But even then, my mother refused to support me. "I won't waste money on someone who only brings problems," she snapped when I brought up financial aid paperwork. It was Lena who got the college fund. Lena who got the support, the visits, the care packages. I scraped by on scholarships, ramen noodles, and the conviction that if I just worked hard enough, I'd earn peace. But peace never came. Not when I graduated. Not when I got my first job. Not even when I moved across the country and stopped talking to them for almost 3 years. Because even in silence, the wound stayed open. No one ever called to say I'm sorry. No one ever asked for my side of the story. Then 3 months before Lena's wedding, I got a call. It was her voice, sweet, calculated. She said she wanted to reconnect. She said she missed me. For a moment, I let myself believe it. I thought maybe she saw the years I spent alone. Maybe she finally understood. But when I arrived at the rehearsal dinner, the air shifted. My name wasn't on the seating chart. My plate was missing. And then I saw my mother whisper something to Lena. They both looked at me and laughed. That was when I walked over confused and asked what was going on. Yeah. And my mother, without shame, without blinking, said, "You're not invited. You make this family look bad." I stood there frozen the same way I had on the staircase all those years ago. I left without a word. But this time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. That night, I opened the one box I had kept from my childhood one my father had given me before he disappeared from my life. Inside, I found a letter. I hadn't read it in over a decade. I'd been too scared. But something told me now was the time, and what I read shook me to my core. The letter revealed a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, especially my mother. Ready to hear what he confessed. The letter was dated June 17th, the summer after my parents' divorce. I had never read it before, not really. I'd found it tucked inside a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my dad's favorite novels when I was 14. But I was too angry back then, too hurt. I shoved it away unread into a shoebox with old birthday cards and scraps of high school poetry. But now sitting alone in my apartment, fresh from the sting of being banned from my sister's wedding, I was ready. And the moment I unfolded the paper, I felt my hands go cold. "My sweet sissy, I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you. I wanted to, but your mother made it impossible. She needed someone to blame, and she chose you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you were the only one who saw the truth." I stopped breathing. "I know you saw her that night. I know you saw the man in the car. And she knew it too. That's why she turned on you so hard. It was easier to turn you into the villain than face her own guilt. I tried to get shared custody, but she threatened to reveal things I couldn't risk. I gave up. I shouldn't have." I remembered that night. I had gone outside to grab something from the car. And I did see someone. A tall man in a leather jacket leaning into the window of my mom's car, kissing her. At the time, I didn't understand. I was just a kid. But she saw me. She knew I saw her. One day you'll know the full truth. And when you do, I hope you can forgive me for leaving you to carry it alone. The room spun. Everything came flooding back. The way my mother would freeze up whenever I asked about the divorce. The way she grew bitter sharp, especially after I brought up Dad. She wasn't angry at me because I was difficult. She was angry because I was a witness, because I was the threat. For the next few days, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. But I did one thing. I scanned the letter, wrote a statement of truth, and sent it to a lawyer friend I met through work. Her name was Amanda, and she was sharp, discreet, and deeply familiar with messy family legal cases. Amanda read the letter and called me immediately. "You know," she said, "if this is true, and I believe it is, it could change everything. Especially if there was a prenup or spousal agreement." "There was," I told her. "My dad mentioned it once." "Then let's dig." Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda helped me file an inquiry with the county court records. Turns out my parents had a prenup agreement that was meant to protect my father's business earnings. But when the divorce happened, my mom got everything: the house, the car, the savings. It didn't make sense. Unless, of course, my father had been forced to sign away his rights, which he had. Amanda found an addendum filed weeks before the divorce was finalized, handwritten, rushed, and not notarized. It was legally flimsy at best, fraudulent at worst. I had a case, but I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, and I wanted to look them in the eye when I delivered it. So I waited. The wedding day came. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I knew the venue. A huge vineyard estate complete with open-air chapel rolling hills, and a guest list full of smug socialites. I arrived wearing navy blue. Not white, not black. Something dignified. And I carried 2 things: my father's letter and a copy of the legal motion Amanda had helped me file to reopen the divorce asset division based on coercion and perjury. I didn't interrupt the ceremony. I waited until the reception, when the wine was flowing and the speeches began. When my mother stood at the microphone pretending to be graceful and loving, I walked in quietly past stunned guests and waiters holding trays of champagne. She saw me mid-sentence and froze. Gasps spread like wildfire. Then Lena turned, and when she saw me, her smile vanished. "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed, stepping off the platform. "I came to deliver something," I said calmly. I opened the envelope and handed her the papers. Then I handed her the letter. "The lies you built everything on, they're done." She glanced at the letter, and for the first time in my life, I saw her face crack. Not with anger, with fear. Lena grabbed the papers, read the letter over her shoulder, then backed away like she'd been slapped. "You lied," she whispered. "You told me Dad left you. Because of Cecilia, people were recording. Guests murmured. The DJ had killed the music." Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Lena's fiancé stepped forward. He looked at my mom, then at Lena. "If this is how your family handles truth, I'm not sure I want in." He walked away, walked out of his own wedding reception and left Lena in tears. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I turned and I left. But this time I walked away with peace. What came next wasn't revenge, it was healing. And the first step, taking control in the most unexpected way. The vineyard silence after the confrontation wasn't quiet, it was suffocating. I had walked out with my head high, but inside I was shaking. Not from fear, not even from adrenaline, but from the years. Years of being silenced. Years of wondering if maybe I was the problem. Years of shrinking myself to fit a story I never wrote. And now, it was out, the truth. The lie my mother wrapped around me like a chain had just snapped in front of 200 wedding guests. But no one ran after me. Not Lena. Not my mother. I got in my car, drove 2 exits down the highway, and pulled into a deserted gas station parking lot. That's when the tears came. Not soft cinematic tears, but guttural hot sobs that shook my chest and made me curl over the steering wheel. It wasn't just grief. It was rage. It was grief inside, rage inside, betrayal, all clawing to the surface like it had waited my whole life to come out. I wasn't okay. For the next few days, I shut off my phone. I didn't go to work. I barely spoke. Amanda called checking in. "The papers are filed. The court's acknowledged receipt." "You did the right thing, Cecilia." Did I? Because here's the thing. They don't tell you about truth. It doesn't fix everything. It cracks things open. It brings light. Yes, but sometimes it leaves behind rubble. And all I could think about was this. If I was wrong about my family loving me, what else had I been wrong about? Was I even lovable to begin with? 3 nights after the wedding, I found myself in my childhood neighborhood. I didn't mean to drive there. My hands had taken the wheel like they knew where I needed to go before I did. I parked across the street from the old house. It looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing. The porch light was still that weird yellow glow. I sat there for 20 minutes watching. And then, like some cruel joke, my mother stepped out onto the porch. She didn't see me. She stood there in a robe lighting a cigarette, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Tired. Angry. Small. I waited, unsure why I hadn't driven off. Then I saw her phone light up. She answered. And in the stillness of the night, I could hear her voice across the street. She destroyed everything she spat. After all I sacrificed for her. After I gave her a home. And that ungrateful little I rolled up my window. There it was. No apology, no reckoning, not even self-awareness. Just blame. Still, after all these years, Still. That's when the final shift happened inside me. Not a breakdown, a breakthrough. She wasn't capable of love the way I needed it, and she never would be. I could keep trying, keep explaining, keep bleeding emotionally in hopes she might offer one clean bandage. But she wouldn't, because the version of me she hated never existed. And the real me, the woman I'd become, she never bothered to know. I was done begging for space at a table I was never meant to sit at. The next morning, I booked a session with a trauma therapist. And that single action, more than the lawsuit, more than the confrontation, was the start of my real revenge. because healing when the world wanted you broken is radical. Days later, Lena called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "You humiliated me. You ruined the most important day of my life." I almost replied with, "You ruined a whole childhood." But I didn't. Instead, I blocked her. Not out of pettiness, out of peace. Amanda called again. "There's talk of settlement," she said. "They don't want to go to court. Let them talk," I replied. "I want everything that was taken from my father returned to his name. I want his story known." "And you," Amanda asked. "I don't want their money. I want my freedom." But the world wasn't done testing me. 2 weeks later, an envelope showed up at my apartment, no return address. Just my name. Inside was a note. For what it's worth, I didn't know. I was just a kid. It was signed Lena. And beneath the note was a photo of us, from when we were maybe 6 and 9, wearing matching dresses at some family BBQ. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't ready to forgive. But maybe one day. Because part of healing I was learning meant letting go not just of the people who hurt me, but of the identity they forced onto me. That week, I drafted something I never thought I'd share, the beginning of a podcast. A space where other Black sheep could tell their stories, where people like me, discarded, doubted, dismissed, could speak freely. I named it The Outcast Diaries, and in the first episode I told my truth, not just about what was done to me, but about what I did to rise anyway. What came next wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, it was reclaiming power on my own terms, and that began with one bold decision. There's a strange quiet that follows after you've exposed everything. No applause, no fanfare. Just silence and the weight of what now I spent the week after the vineyard explosion in a soft, strange limbo. The legal wheels were turning. Amanda handled it all with the precision of a surgeon. But inside me, something had changed. It was like the armor I had worn for years. The defensiveness, the hyper-independence, the cold control had finally cracked. Not because I was weak, but because I no longer needed it. I began journaling again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. The first few pages were messy, rambling, a mix of anger and grief and distant memories. But one line kept returning like an echo I couldn't ignore. If I was never meant to belong there, maybe I was meant to build something else. One afternoon, I met Amanda for coffee. She was more than just my lawyer. Now she'd become the first person in years who truly saw me. "Have you thought about what you want once the case is over?" she asked, sipping her latte. "Not what you want from them, what you want for yourself." I looked out the window. The city was buzzing with life, people in motion, kids laughing, tourists snapping photos. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost floating through it. "I want peace," I said, and a voice. Amanda nodded. "Then you already won." The next day, I published the first episode of The Outcast Diaries. I recorded it from my living room with nothing but a mic, my laptop, and a script I'd rewritten 5 times. My voice cracked a little as I introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Cecilia." And for most of my life, I believed I was the problem. Today, I'm here to tell you that wasn't true. And maybe it's not true for you either. The response was slow at first. A handful of listens, a few anonymous comments. But then one message hit my inbox. I thought I was the only one. "My family kicked me out at 19 because I wouldn't cover for my dad's affair. Your story gave me the courage to speak up." "Thank you," at Shelby writes. I read it 3 times, then burst into tears. For the first time, my pain had meaning beyond myself. It was a bridge, not a scar. I started doing weekly episodes, each one themed gaslighting and golden children, the burden of being the truth teller, when family is just a word. With every upload, the audience grew, and so did I. One evening, I received a message from someone I didn't expect, my father's sister, Aunt Margot. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. After the divorce, my mother had cut contact with all of Dad's relatives and convinced me they didn't want anything to do with me. But Margot's message shattered that lie. "Cecilia, I found your podcast." I cried. I always suspected what your mother did, but I never had proof. Your dad loved you so much. He talked about you all the time. I wish I'd fought harder to stay in your life." My hands trembled as I read it. All these years, I thought I'd been forgotten. But I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been hidden. That night, we spoke on the phone for 2 hours. She told me stories about my father that I'd never heard, about how he used to brag that I was the smartest girl in the room, that he kept a photo of me in his wallet even after he moved out. She mailed me that photo the next day. In it, I'm 8, sitting on his shoulders at the beach, both of us grinning like fools. I made a decision. It wasn't about my mother or Lena or even the lawsuit. It was about reclaiming my own story. I gave Amanda the green light to move forward without delay, full pursuit of the truth, public if needed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I posted one final statement on my personal social media. For anyone wondering if I'm bitter, no, I'm not bitter. I'm better. And I'm done letting silence protect the guilty while it punishes the brave. I disabled comments after that. Not out of fear, out of finality. That was my line in the sand. The next day, I booked a one-way ticket. Not to run, to rediscover. I'd spent my whole life in a city where every corner reminded me of who I wasn't allowed to be. It was time to find out who I could be on my own terms. That journey geographically and emotionally would lead to ripple effects no one saw coming, especially for those who tried to bury my truth. The day the court sent its ruling, I was in Lisbon on a sun-drenched terrace, sipping coffee, editing the next podcast episode. Amanda's name flashed on my phone screen. "Ready for justice," she said, her voice practically smiling. I held my breath as she read the judgment aloud. The divorce case between my parents had officially been reopened. The court acknowledged fraudulent omission of assets and deceit in the division. Translation: my mother was found guilty of manipulating the original proceedings by hiding assets, altering testimony, and emotionally coercing a minor me into staying silent. Her punishment wasn't jail, it was worse. Reputation, legacy, control, gone. Half of her current estate would now be reallocated. A portion would be returned under my father's name publicly. Another part was to be held in a trust I could access for my podcast platform and community advocacy work. And that wasn't all. The local press picked up the case. Not for scandal, but for story. Daughter clears. Father's name 18 years after scandal. Silence was never justice. It went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't the shameful daughter anymore. I was the truth teller, the survivor, the woman who spoke when no one else dared, Lena. Her fiancé's family saw the headlines. They pulled out of the wedding permanently. He called it off, stating he wanted nothing to do with liars or legacies built on cruelty. The invitations had already gone out. So had the dress, the vendors, the venue, all canceled, no refunds. Lena posted a long dramatic message online, but the comments brutal. "You mocked your sister on your wedding day. Look what karma wore to yours." And my mother. She vanished from social media. Her name, a respected realtor for years, became synonymous with deception in every online forum in town. I didn't rejoice, but I won't lie. I felt whole. And as the dust settled, what mattered most wasn't what they lost, but what I finally gained. Some victories aren't loud. They're quiet, steady, internal. Like the morning I woke up in a tiny coastal village in Greece, made tea, and realized no one owned my story but me anymore. I didn't need their approval or their apologies, because I had reclaimed something far more powerful myself. The podcast grew beyond anything I imagined, reaching women, men, and even teenagers who had lived in the shadows of family shame, silence, and betrayal. Every message I received reminded me we are never alone in the truth. I now speak at workshops, host healing retreats, and travel with no need to explain my joy. The Cecilia who once stood outside the family circle, forgotten and dismissed, is gone. What remains is a woman who found peace, not through revenge, but through clarity. Not by hurting others, but by refusing to be hurt any longer. So if you're watching this and wondering if your voice matters, it does. If they called you too much, too honest, too sensitive, you're exactly enough. And if my story resonated with you, Feel free to subscribe, or even share your story in the comments. You never know who's waiting to feel seen.